Good morning. I'm Juan Rivera from Village Preservation, and we are here to urge the Manhattan Borough President, who will be holding a public hearing tonight, and city officials who will be voting on the SoHo, NoHo plan in the coming weeks to vote no. No, because the plan is bad for SoHo, NoHo, and Chinatown. No, because it is bad for the city. No, because it is bad for affordability and equity. And no, because at the end of the day, this is just a big giveaway to real estate interests, and everybody knows it. I'm joined today by the incoming council member of District 1, which includes the neighborhoods of SoHo, NoHo, and Chinatown that the mayor wants to upzone. I'm also joined by the former council members for the district who represented the district from the time of its creation through 2009. And I'm also joined by a resident of the portion of Chinatown that will be upzoned. And he's a member also of Community Board 2. He will be speaking about the board opposition to this plan and about the disproportionate impact that it will have on Chinatown and about the city's lack of engagement with residents of that neighborhood. First up is Christopher Marty. Chris recently won an overwhelming victory in the race to be the Democratic nominee for representing the district. He was born and raised on the Lower East Side, the child of Dominican immigrants, and his entire adult life he has advocated for a more equitable neighborhood and city, fighting against tenant displacement and against developer-driven upzoning such as the current plan. Chris?
Hello everyone! When I say Gail, you say vote no. Gail! Gail! When I say Gail, you say vote no. Gail! Gail! I'm happy to be here with former District 1 City Council members Alan Gerson and Catherine Freed. Two council members that listened to their community, respected their community, and actually represented their community when it came to land use decisions. We are here today because Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer will vote on an unprecedented land use decision. Whether to vote to overdevelop Chinatown, SoHo, and NoHo and displace thousands of residents, this is the choice that she has to make. Gail has a legacy of supporting small businesses, voting against the East Harlem rezoning policy, standing against super tall developments in Midtown, and fighting it back against our mayor. But why is she planning to have a change of heart today? What was that? Why is our borough president ready to change her legacy today? Look, we all know this saying. It's not how you start, but it's how you end. And this is my question to Gail. Is this how you're going to end your administration? If Gail votes yes, she'll be known for allowing the first overdevelopment in the historic district since the 1960s when the Landmarks Preservation Committee was established. She will allow overdevelopment when it comes to big box retail around the Broadway corridor and the smaller streets. She would tell Chinatown residents, SoHo residents, NoHo residents who have been advocating for the community for years to say, your voice doesn't matter. What matters is real estate interests and the mayor. Is this your legacy? Will your legacy be, let's zone 30 blocks and not actually build one unit affordable housing? Will your legacy, a legacy of over a decade of community service, will your legacy be to build no affordable housing for the future of our community? This is the decision that Gail Brewer has today. We've been fighting this fight for a really long time. We've been asking all the right questions for decades. So this isn't about confusion or misinformation. She knows why we're here today. She knows why hundreds of residents will be on the Zoom call at 6 p.m. today. And we're just asking her to work with me, a future colleague in the city council, to say, let's work with our community, let's work with stakeholders, let's fight for small businesses, and let's make a decision that's just for everyone in our community. She has an option. Nothing is a done deal. Please, Gail, think about the future. Think about the future colleagues. And think about the generations that voting yes will affect if you do so today. That's all I have to say. And if she hasn't heard it once, let's say it loud enough. When I say Gail, you say vote no. Gail! Vote no! Gail! Vote no! One more time. When I say Gail, you say vote no. Gail! Vote no! Gail! Vote no! Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Our next speaker is Catherine Freed. Catherine was a representative for City Council District 1 from the year it was created, from 92 through 2001. A fierce advocate for housing preservation and for tenant rights. Catherine was also served as a judge for the State Supreme Court from 2012 till this year.
Right. Yeah, we don't want to go there. Make sure I have this hat on. No, of course not. This side. Now it's on.
Keep it a little bit closer.
Now it's on?
Yeah.
Yay. Okay. All right. So I moved into what is now considered SoHo in 1969. Of course, we turned around and immediately went to Woodstock, but that's beside the point. And pretty much from the beginning, SoHo was a unique area. And in the 70s, when we started to fight to get landmarking, and after that, when we did special district zoning and to protect artists' live working quarters, I was involved in most of that. So let me just say, want to remind people that SoHo was not created by government. SoHo was not created with money from the city, or for that matter, money from anyone else. Most of SoHo was created by individuals, usually artists, or doing something in the art field, because they needed the space. And you had acres and acres, used to be called Hell's Hundreds Acres, in SoHo of empty building stock, because it was for light manufacturing, and as the technology changed, the lofts were empty. So individuals started moving into it. And you started initially, you had AIR, which was Artists Living Work Quarters, which was initially commercial, but it was there so that the fire department or the uniformed services would actually know that people were living in those buildings. Anyway, fast forward, after all the fights to get SoHo created, SoHo then becomes a very chic neighborhood. But the people who put their blood, sweat, and tears, not to mention their own personal money, into creating SoHo, most of them remained there. Many of them are still there today, and we were able to not only create an amazingly successful community, but a very unique one. In fact, the cast iron storefront, building fronts and facades that you now see in SoHo, you can't find anywhere else, except some in Chicago and some in Paris. So, the problem has been that since SoHo has become successful, developers have been trying to find a way around the kind of the protective zoning that we put in, that would allow people to remain there, that would protect them, that would allow small commercial uses, not large big box uses. And along with that, NoHo's story was somewhat the same. It was just a little later. And also Chinatown. My first question is, why did they hook those sections of Chinatown onto this development property? And I say development property because that's why they did it. Because they're ripe for development, and because in many cases, they contain a lot of low-income tenants. Like a lot of SoHo, I just want to point out that if you look at the statistics, people have this attitude about SoHo, a prejudice that everyone who lives in SoHo is wealthy. Well, they're not. Maybe 25% are wealthy, but the other 75% are not. And you have a large percentage of people who are low and middle income. You also have a lot of diversity, contrary to what they're saying. So when they talk about creating affordable housing, it's a myth. They are going to be destroying affordable housing. They are going to be destroying a lot of the diversity in the neighborhood, especially on the fringes, which are overwhelmingly parts of Chinatown and the Lower East Side. And there are loopholes that you could drive a truck through. So what this is, as Chris said, this is just a development grab. They've been trying to get a hold of this area since it became successful and make a buck on it, or a lot of bucks. So I would say to Gail that please have your people run the numbers. Chances are you will not only not create affordable housing, you'll lose affordable housing, and you'll lose diversity, and you'll get people in there that will be paying rents that no one who's actually middle income could actually afford, much less lower income. So I'm hoping that Gail, who has always fought against oversized development and always helped the little guy, will continue to do that and realize first the incredible nature of SoHo. I mean, just as far as preservation, you can't recreate SoHo. You can't build over it and expect to have it the same landmark district that it's been. That alone is worth protecting. But in addition to that, the numbers of artists who stayed there, who put their own money into it, who have been creating amazing works of art, and it's not just artists, photographers, it's ballet, it's all of the performing arts. We need SoHo because what they produce cannot be duplicated. You can't get a community like this anywhere else. This community is worth protecting. And in Chinatown, again, why did they put parts of Chinatown, or what are considered Chinatown, into this developmental block, except that it created the possibility of making a lot of money, but to do it, you're going to have to evict a lot of tenants. And let me tell you, that's not going to be easy, but it can be done, and it has been done. So again, I would urge Gail Brewer to vote against this, run the numbers. It is an absolute fallacy and an outrage to think that this is going to create affordable housing or that it's going to create more diversity. It will do exactly the opposite. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Our next speaker is Alan Gerson. Alan represented the district right after 9/11 from 1992 through 2009. He is a 2002. Sorry, right after 9/11. 2002 to 2009. He's a longtime resident of affordable housing himself and a strong proponent of the preservation and expansion of affordable housing and of the rights of tenants.
So let's be clear. This is not an upzoning plan. This is an up and out plan that will force out affordable residents who work and make this city great, and these neighborhoods the great places that they are. This is unjust, unfair, and unacceptable. All of us here, all of us believe that Lower Manhattan requires additional affordable housing. Affordable housing starts with preserving existing affordable housing. When we were in office after 9/11, we put in place an affordable housing preservation plan to prevent the hemorrhaging. This plan will result, as Chris and Catherine have said, in the loss of affordable housing. We need to preserve what we have in Chinatown and throughout our communities, and we do need to expand affordable housing. And by the way, let's start, we could start by making 5 World Trade Center an all affordable housing development. That would be the best tribute to those who worked and rescued us after 9/11 to allow them to live in the district which they serve. But this plan will do the precise opposite. This plan will also undermine and attack the core soul of our city. This is part of, make no mistake about it, this is part of a real estate effort stampede to do away with historic districts, to do away with landmarking, to create a big box high-rise monolith across Manhattan and all of the city. It has to stop here in Chinatown, SoHo, and NoHo. These communities, Chinatown, SoHo, and NoHo, each of these unique communities go to the core of what makes New York City the great and special place that it is. I didn't move into SoHo, but when I was, we won't say how many years ago, but when I was a kid, my mother moved our family right across the street from what is now SoHo, and in proximity to Chinatown and NoHo. And I saw the transformation of a former vibrant printing and manufacturing district that was on its way out at the time to a great vibrant arts district that has contributed to so much to the culture of our city, along with Chinatown and along with NoHo. If we eviscerate, and that culture still exists in each of these 3 unique communities, if we eviscerate the uniqueness, if we take away the arts character, the cultural character, we will take away from what makes New York the special place that it is for people of all, including affordable incomes. So let's go back to the drawing board. I want to make one last point. What is particularly irresponsible of this plan is that there is no provision for an adequate support infrastructure. This goes against any kind of basic common sense and basic principles of planning. No provision for sewage, no provision for traffic alleviation of what is already a traffic nightmare in each of these, a dangerous traffic nightmare in each of these communities, which this plan will only exacerbate. No provision for schools, no provision for green or open space. This is an environmental as well as a neighborhood and cultural disaster. So we are here united across Chinatown, NoHo, and SoHo. We will not be displaced. We will not lose our beloved communities. Let's go back to the drawing board. Let's come up with a true affordable housing plan. Let's identify where, as I said, start with 5 World Trade Center, but let's identify where we can create true affordable housing while maintaining this unique characteristics of these communities. When I was in office, we actually expanded the boundaries of the historic districts. This is a frontal assault, which I take personally, and we are united as a community to say that SoHo, NoHo, and Chinatown will remain communities for the people who made them great. And I have faith, and I just want to conclude, I have faith in my good friend Gail Brewer. She has a record of support for affordable housing and community input in zoning. I feel that when she hears our voices today and tonight, she will do the right thing, and Gail, together we can come up with a plan that works for Chinatown, SoHo, NoHo, with more affordable housing without losing what we have. Onwards and forwards. Oh, and my predecessor reminds me that all of the community boards, Community Board 2, which contains this district, is overwhelmingly opposed. So this plan does not have community support. We can regroup and come up with a true community plan that preserves the arts, preserves Chinatown, preserves SoHo and NoHo, and creates affordable housing. And that's what we will do with our new incoming city council member, I'm sure.
Speaking of Community Board 2, our next speaker is Anthony Wong, who is a member of Community Board 2 and a lifelong resident of Chinatown.
to reiterate what I said during last month's full board meeting at Community Board 2. So I come to you as a resident of Chinatown. I've been living in the Opportunity Zone, which they've designated as SoHo East for the past 36 years. So if this plan were to go through within the next 5-6 months, am I to tell my friends next year that I actually live in SoHo East now rather than Chinatown, which I've known for the past 36 years? Shocking. When this whole process was going through in the first place in 2018-2019, they did do outreach to the SoHo corridor, NoHo, etc., but they didn't do proper outreach to Chinatown, which was included, as mentioned by former council member Freed over here, into this SoHo NoHo rezoning plan. I inquired with the current council member's office, who talked to city planning, and they did a one-day sort of planning in terms of printing flyers in Chinese, which they only distributed to commercial tenants. And then the workshop was going to be the following Monday. I, however, was unable to attend because I was out of town. But I told my mom, who's a resident of the Opportunity Zone, to make sure that she attended the focus group, outreach group that was happening across the street at the Museum of Chinese America, and she attended. In the evening time, when I gave her a call, she told me how many people attended. 1, herself. So if I didn't tell my mom to go attend, city planning also wouldn't have been able to check off the box saying that they did do outreach and to Chinatown, etc., in bilingual languages, etc. But this is disingenuous in terms of moving through with the process, not obtaining sufficient outreach and input from folks who don't speak English in the neighborhood. It should be noted that this particular Opportunity Zone contains more than 43% of the proposed affordable housing that they have in mind. However, there are 2 big entities within this Opportunity Zone. One's Edison Properties, another is a family that owns at least 5 contiguous properties together, which are currently commercial properties. Edison Property has a parking lot. So, in terms of city planning's renderings, which they've been showing in terms of their presentations, those major renderings that they show are actually belonging to 2 property owners. So that's a major concern. And whether or not you can force these individuals to build affordable housing is yet to be seen. They're currently commercial properties. Why would they build housing at all? And if they were to build housing, would it be affordable housing? It's not guaranteed in this particular rezoning plan. So I implore the Borough President to vote no, just as Community Board 2 has voted no, and also the rest of the folks who will be listening to this plan to vote no as well. Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you, Anthony, and to all our speakers. I should note that our speakers are joined by a long and growing list of organizations that also oppose this plan: the Met Council on Housing, Tenants Pact, the Sierra Club's New York City chapter, the Chinatown Working Group, New York City Loft Tenants, Lower Manhattan Loft Tenants, the National Trust for Historic Preservation, the City Club of New York, among many others. And we, of course, at Village Preservation are strongly opposed to this wrong-headed plan, and we are enormously gratified that past and future council members are seeing through the city's progressive posturing, and that they're seeing this plan for the sham that it is. This is a plan that would do the exact opposite of what the city claims. It would make the neighborhoods richer, less affordable, and less equitable. Under a guise of social justice, it would build little to no affordable housing. It would displace hundreds of low-income, rent-regulated tenants. It would displace small businesses, and it would usher in a flood of high-end, big-chain office buildings, hotels, condos, and NYU dorms. And all for what? To line the pockets of developers who have lobbied and donated generously to the mayor in the hopes of benefiting from this final fire sale of our neighborhoods. That is what this plan would do, and that is why it must be stopped. Thank you all for coming.
Take questions. You have questions?
About
lot of artists in SoHo?
What?
What about the argument that it's not really an artist neighborhood anymore?
Can't hear the
So Lincoln,
Lincoln, what's the question?
so
The argument that it's not really an artist neighborhood because they weren't checking the certification, and a lot of bankers and lawyers have moved in, and it's a different neighborhood than when Catherine, when she was there, or Alan created.
so let me just say
Actually,
first.
oh, I'm sorry. You want to go?
Well, just very brief. Just then look. No question that SoHo and NoHo, and like every community, it's not the same as it was years ago. But the fact is, there is still a significant degree of artists, art galleries, art creativity in that area that is far more than other neighborhoods, and would be the jealousy of many other cities and places if they were to create an arts district. As you know, Lincoln, I have called for improving the zoning to protect the remaining arts character, to have true arts community zoning. That needs to be done, and it's not too late. But this plan does the exact opposite, would undermine what remains, what is still extraordinarily significant culturally and economically, along with all the individual businesses that will be displaced by the big boxes.
And pretty much the same way Alan has just said. Take a look at the figures that are in the village preservation's study. Thank you. It shows that overwhelmingly 75% of this district is not wealthy. That's why I said before, it's like a prejudice against SoHo. It was very successful. It shouldn't be penalized because it was successful, but 75% of the district makes up everything except the rich part, but those are the original artists. Many of them are here today who moved into this area in like the 70s, the 80s. They moved in, they put their own money into developing it. I don't know if you remember, but in those days, the landlords would welcome people in to a vacant loft. They put their own money into putting into facilities so that they could live there, so that they could work there on whatever branch of the arts and culture that they produced. And it was only after that, when there were no protections, then these people started getting evicted, and people with a lot more money moved in because they were big spaces, and the landlords didn't have to put money into it. On the other hand, there were plenty of landlords who welcomed people because no one was using those lofts. But as Alan said, this is in many ways the soul of the cultural community in New York, and you just can't get rid of it. And I don't think that the people who work so hard over so many decades should be prejudiced by the blind bias of people who think that everyone who is in SoHo is rich. They aren't. And yes, there should be some changes. Yes, more people should be allowed in. Yes, they should widen the idea of what an artist is. But we should preserve it. And this does the exact opposite. This is a gift to developers. It's like de Blasio's last parting shot. I just remind people that Rivington House was one of the first shots, and that was a giveaway to rich developers, and it took money away from the community. Well, he's still doing it. He's going out in the same note.
In addition, in 2019, the city, during their envision process, said there was hardly any artists in SoHo. But we brought hundreds of residents who were artists to these meetings. So I wouldn't trust the city's information. I think you have to really trust residents to know their neighbors, to turn out to meetings, as we have been doing for years.
Lincoln, I'd be remiss if I, before we left, did not make mention of my mother's good friend, Bill Passananti. You remember Bill? Bill Passananti was the longtime, some of you must remember him, a longtime assembly member who actually wrote the state's loft law. or the equivalent of it way back when, and facilitated, making a long story short, but facilitated the transformation. And the vision at that time, after the artists were beginning to reclaim the space, was that New York, as part of our great cultural tapestry, required an artist live, work neighborhood. And that was what these folks behind us created, SoHo, NoHo, and on top of all the great culture that is being conducted in Chinatown. And that's what we're saying. Sure, it's changed, but the core is still there. More than the core is still there. Let's preserve that because our city needs it and build on it. And I know Bill Passanani would say that, as would my mother. Because you weren't staff in Albany, that's not right.
No, this was long before.
And what do you think of the city's public engagement process? What do you think of the city's public engagement process?
It's a sham.
Yeah, it's ironic that you want to talk about the communities, and the communities that have been kept out of the process are the ones we've been talking for, SoHo, NoHo, and Chinatown. They've gone out of their way to make sure, city planning has gone out of their way to avoid input from the community, and when there was input from the community, they attacked it. So, yeah, we don't think a lot of their process.
They ignore it.
Said it all.
Any other questions? Well, thank you everyone for showing up today.
Thank you.
Thank you.